Hey everyone, this is Socratic Hobbits, a podcast where Kyle Morse and me, Daniel Hayward, try to ask big questions and then answer them. Sometimes we stay on topic. Thanks for listening. Last time we were talking, you did a new device.
Oh yeah, I have it. It's behind me. I just had this already set up.
Always change things up on me. That's all right though. Yeah. Do you? You know what I just noticed? I think you always do our podcasts sitting on like a. I want to call it a Bosu ball, but it's not. It's just a exercise ball.
Swiss ball.
Swiss ball? Did the Swiss come up with that?
I don't know why it's called that.
I mean, presumably. Doesn't look anything by like their cheese, but that was a bad joke. How you doing, man?
We're starting on a roll.
Well, no, I don't know how much of this is coming in. It takes a minute for us to warm up. Let's see. And I was figuring we could just we chatted for a bit after we stopped recording last time, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was good to catch up,
Yeah.
especially where we didn't
So
really get to at James's wedding.
no, you were a popular man, and me and my wife knew basically nobody except for you and James and people that I could count on one hand.
You should have just come up and inserted yourself in the conversation.
Yeah,
I think you would have been actually pretty fascinated by some of the conversations that we were having.
I'm sure I would have, but uh, some of the people that are in my marriage are not as outgoing, and that would be really uncomfortable for them.
Well, they they could get a glass of wine and hang out
Yeah,
down.
yeah. Part of it was, I mean, yeah. So we were in Boise for like less than 16 hours.
Yeah, you missed the time change.
I hardly, yeah, barely. I will say we stayed at this really interesting bed and breakfast. Did we talk about it all last time, or have you and I talked about it?
No, I realized after the fact that we really didn't talk at all about that wedding. We talked about the wedding I'd been to the weekend before when you were in California.
That's right. So it was a probably a six-bedroom house,
Uh huh.
or it had been converted into like six bedrooms, and all of them had uh, number padlocks.
Okay.
Pretty much every single door in the house that I noticed. They had maybe five or six arcade games in the living room, along with a uh, probably a knee-high table in the living room that was maybe 10 by 15 feet. It took up almost all of the floor space in the living room,
Okay.
and a not quite as large but close table in the kitchen, or the dining area, and you could probably have had 16 or maybe 18 people sit at that table comfortably, perhaps more.
So this was an Airbnb.
This was an Airbnb, and in addition to this, so in addition to everything I described, they had like chickens and goats out back, along with some very efficiently um, used raised beds,
Uh huh.
and yeah, they just like presumably that was their business. I think the gal who ran it mentioned that her husband was an engineer, or maybe it was I don't know. They were married, um, but yeah. So that was like her full time job, and
Mm-hmm.
she was pretty much available. Um,
So they lived there.
I think so. Yeah. But in addition to that, they had like a 12 or $1,500 espresso machine in the kitchen that was just available for use.
Uh huh.
And so we left with very good coffees, and my wife and I were talking as we left. It was like, well, if we ever come back to Boise, we'll stay here.
Nice.
But it was really comfortable. But yeah,
So how many of the rooms did they rent out?
the nights that we were there, as far as I could tell, all of them were rented out. Do you mean which ones were available to rent?
I guess I meant how much of the house did they reserve to themselves and their family, and how much of the house was Airbnb?
I would say it was probably 80% Airbnb.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like, I think that they had um, probably a very large I don't know if you've ever been in somebody they used to make these in master suites where there would be, like, a bathroom attached, which is pretty normal still, but then there would also be a sitting room in the master bedroom,
Okay, yeah.
and I think it was the only thing I can think of is that it's probably one of those setups,
Uh-huh.
but like, the I said everything was efficiently used in the backyard, but it's pretty much postage stamp lots. Um, they had you've seen our front yard.
Yeah.
Our front yard was bigger than I think their front and backyard combined,
And they
and they
had
still
goats and
managed.
chickens.
Yeah.
Pygmy goats or normal sized goats?
There might have been pygmy goats.
Okay.
I think I just saw evidence of them. I didn't see them. So there was green space behind the house that didn't look developed. Um, and they might have roamed out there or something. I don't know.
I do know there's a family at church who raised pygmy goats for a while, and actually
Hmm.
they were trying to breed them to milk them, but it was taking too long, and
Oh,
so
so you have to
they
milk a lot of goats to get a cup.
yeah. Well, the husband was saying that there is people have bred them to actually get a decent amount of milk out of a pygmy goat.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, they can eat. I mean, if they're like other goats, they can eat a wide variety of things. They're
yeah,
not particularly picky. Huh.
that's pretty cool.
Anyway, yeah, it was really really interesting. And the garage you could see was set up like I, I couldn't quite tell what was going on. There were three towers that looked electronic, and it looked like there was water cooling on them of some kind.
Oh,
You think they were like what do you call them? Bitcoin farms?
mining.
Yeah, they had that, and then there was a full gym setup, and one of the bays was for a car, and it was I think a 3 or 4 car garage. It was
Uh
a
huh.
pretty large house.
That's pretty cool that they got that set up because right now crypto mining gear is crazy expensive because of the cost of chips.
So yep. Yeah, yeah, they had a couple different kind of things going on for them, but yeah, it was anyway. I mean, for the time that we were there, it was really enjoyable.
Did they have any kids or just the two of them?
I think it was just the two of them. They were, uh, yeah, probably not much older. Yours and my age, plus or minus 3, I
Uh
would
huh.
guess.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, how's work and stuff going?
It's been work has been we're in a little bit of a lull for me right now because we're between the time when we release parts and the time when we get parts. And right now we're figuring out how to like work our way around difficulties in getting parts. Um
Hmm,
home stuff
like
it's
chips or other
chips,
stuff?
sheet metal parts, everything, plastic parts. Making my way through a couple of books right now that I'm really enjoying.
Are they
Um,
self-help books, Kyle?
nope, they are absolutely not self help books, although they do have a lot
Are they
of
are
pers-
they self-hindrance?
applications.
Okay.
Um, one is the book I've mentioned before, which is The Wonderful Works of God by Herman Bavinck, who is a Dutch theologian around the turn of from the 1900s to 20 to the from the 19th 19th to 20th, yeah, 19th to 20th century.
Hmm.
And then the other book, and so that's a kind of a lay theology book going through just the broad um, scope of Christian doctrine. And then the other book is it's an abridged version of Winston Churchill's 6 volume series on World War II. And that book's been fascinating, just getting insight into Churchill as an executive, especially between 1940 and 1941, kind of the executive of the free world, and how he managed his time to be effective and how he set himself up to um, work on things where he could provide the most input for get the most out of what he was putting in while bringing people around him who could fill his deficiencies and excel in their own right.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, I know he would. I mean, obviously from the World War II stuff, I would take all that with a grain of salt because he might have his own specific opinion. I mean, he doesn't pretend to be, um, what do you say, like, unbiased. He doesn't pretend to be unbiased. About the war,
What do you mean by
but
that? Because I mean, obviously, he's not going to say that like Hitler was okay.
um, that's a very interesting interpretation of what I said. But no, I don't mean I'm talking about so in a war, you're gonna have um, faults, right? There's gonna be poor decisions, I think, because you're given a limited amount of information.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that for the most part, a lot of generals wrote memoirs after wars that they participated in.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I don't think that anybody who fought on the Allies' side thinks like, "Oh, maybe we made the wrong call and shouldn't have stopped Hitler." But I do think that they're going to posture, explain themselves, show why they did what they did was right, even though to say that they didn't have mixed motives in making certain decisions or
And I think that's what's so cool about reading someone's autobiography is you don't have anything between them and how they're describing things. And so if you've interacted with the people, you can understand why they're presenting the decision that's been made a certain way, um in a way to make themselves look better. And then you can also see where they're being really honest about, yeah, we messed up here and I wish we'd done it this way, but instead we did it this other way, and it caused a lot of pain and misery. um
yeah, does Winston Churchill so how far are you into his autobiography?
well, this is just the autobiography. Well, it's kind of an autobiography and kind of a history of World War. So it goes from he goes from the end of World War One all the way to the end of World War Two.
Mhm.
And right now I'm in 1940.
So, does he talk about I guess, uh, World War II officially started, at least in my remembering, is 1939,
Yep,
but
with the invasion of Poland.
does he Mhm. Um, yeah, 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 yeah. So, does he talk about I mean, have you heard him talk about any mistakes yet? Or is he not really talking about it from his point of view? Is he talking about it from the point of view of
He's talking about for the point of view of um, the British people in particular through his lens,
Okay.
and he's made he definitely has a soft spot in his heart for the British people, obviously. Um, but he's described, okay, at this point, if we had stood up and said we're going to enforce the armistice signed in 1918, Hitler would have been done. If at this point we would have stopped stood up strong against the Italians in Abyssinia, Hitler wouldn't have had um, Mussolini to rely on. Or if we had just given Mussolini Abyssinia, Mussolini wouldn't have felt the need to go to Hitler. Here,
Mhm.
if we had reached out to Stalin and the Russians, Stalin would not have viewed the British and French as weak and would have stayed on our side and not made an alliance with Hitler, which allowed Hitler to attack France and Poland.
So, do you feel like when Churchill is saying these things, do you feel like he's being honest or do you feel like he's doing something different?
No, I think if you read it, you'd see like, because he goes through and says, okay, we got to this point right here, and this was our last chance to stop World War II from happening.
Hmm. Okay.
And if we had taken a strong line here, we if we had just when Hitler invaded Austria, if we had responded by invading, taking back the Sudetenland, Luxembourg, that area, that would have caused the German people because the German army was weak at that time. That would have caused the German people to realize that Hitler was not someone to be followed, and he was leading them down a path of ruin. And that would have kind of gotten rid of the aura or the gold shine around Hitler. and he
Mhm.
wouldn't have had, because he went into Austria, and even though the looking at information from the German sources after the war, uh, historians were able to see that the German military fell apart when they tried to like roll into Austria, and it was like
Mm,
this huge mess. It
yeah.
was just because Austria was so um, weak compared to Germany that they were even able to take it over, and had been so undermined by the secret police. Um,
Mm,
but Hitler was in a very vulnerable spot at that point, where he was claiming his role as the German protector, and all that needed to happen was the Allies to go, "Oh, actually, you're not," and we just took this ground that you had claimed was your own, and it didn't
mm,
even we didn't even lose any people doing it, and it would
yeah.
have just, there were a lot of German generals at the time who wanted Hitler out of there because they, for a couple reasons. One, they feared what he could do, and the second thing, um, which Churchill doesn't really hit on, but you kind of see it in the tension going through there, and I think this actually influenced Bonhoeffer as well. Um, the aristocratic class in Germany
Mhm.
really did not like Hitler because he was a peasant in essence who was coming up to rule, and so they wanted to get back to the Kaiser and the way things had been with the German monarchy, and possibly like a constitutional monarchy like um, Britain has, or some other places.
I don't know that things would have been any different if Hitler had been stopped right at the beginning. Um, at least, I mean, things probably would have been different, obviously, but the German people were starving, right? I mean, and prior to Hitler, they were dying because of starvation. And I mean,
And
the re-
Churchill addresses that too, and addresses how poorly the Allies after World War II,
World
World
War One,
War One, thought through the situation they were putting the German people in,
yeah. So does he talk about that mistake?
and basically taking away. Yeah, oh yeah, that's where he starts.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess what's probably coming out right now is that I'm suspicious of Winston Churchill because yeah, I just feel like in modern culture, he's seen as this like stalwart defender of freedom, and like he, I either through letters or um, other stuff that's come out long past World War II, like he enjoyed being at war.
Yeah,
And I think he had been the prime minister. He had run for prime minister, or do you know? And then he didn't make it. Yeah,
he was a cavalry officer.
yeah,
Like that was how he got his start.
sure. I just don't. Uh, yeah, I just don't want to praise somebody who w- wants a nation at war, right? I think that war is like a necessary. I think that going to,
That's
yeah, I
in,
guess war is a necessary evil.
that's interesting you say that, because he spends like the first half of the book talking about how Britain could have avoided this unnecessary war.
Yeah, and so again, that's why. And maybe I have to revisit some of the things that I think I know, but that's why I'm suspicious of those comments or those, um, yeah, just the things that the things that you're saying from him.
I guess I fall more on the side of, here's someone who did really great things, and I'm not going to be the critic who critiques the man in the arena. Because I think there's a temptation.
Is it okay to be suspicious? Because I'm not yeah, because I'm really not critiquing him. I'm just it's new information that I'm not just swallowing. Is that critiquing?
I think it's fascinating how quickly you latched onto swimming caps and how suspicious you are of Churchill. And I'm curious about that.
How sorry, swim caps?
Yeah, uh, the episodes a while ago or a couple episodes ago where you were talking about how terrible it was that people weren't being allowed to swim in the Olympics because they had the wrong swimming cap.
Yeah, so that was I mean, that's an index of other things that were happening at the same time where basically black people were being um, disqualified from being in the Olympics at a yeah, just at a differently than other people who were not black by the Olympic National Committee.
And I guess I think someone
Swimming
could
caps was
be.
part of it. I think that a lot of people were also like smoking pot is legal in many states at this point.
Mhm.
Um, and they found pot in a black person's system. I'm sure that they were not the only person who had been smoking pot within the, I don't know how long it stays, but she was sent home. Um,
Women are more
and I think
likely to test positive than men because they have a higher body fat.
sure, I don't disagree with that, but yeah, there was just a handful. Like I don't know. The swimming cap was one of a few things, but yeah, I guess when I see somebody and when I see a group of people being treated differently than others in a negative way, mistreated, yeah, I'm gonna say something because I don't think it's right.
Right. Do you think about how you're being presented that information?
Um,
How it's all rising to the surface at the same time?
I suppose not, but these are still things that have happened, and so I'm curious what you're getting at when you say that.
I guess I'm surprised. I guess I was taken aback by your reticence to just look at the story of history from someone who experienced something that that really shaped the world, and
Hmm.
your questions around whether they represented things accurately, and then with something more something more recent, which has been um, which could be viewed in a similar light as okay, people have an agenda to get out a certain message, and you're less suspicious. And I guess I would say that there's equal chance on in both cases that the people who are presenting the story don't have an agenda, just as there's a possibility that the people who are presenting the information do have an agenda. But you seem to be more um, eager to hop on the let's look critically at this and not as quick to look critically at this other thing. And I'm curious if you see any difference in how you approach the two data sets.
Yeah. So again, I'm not throwing everything out Churchill said. He was there. He played a huge part. I'm not saying I just he's held up as a giant among men and generally as a good character, right? Or a good person. Okay? If you disagree with
I think
that,
he's held up as a strong leader.
okay? Sure. Um the way that I have heard him talked about, I'm going to go with like I've seen him just as a good person. Really the last that's just been my experience. Like when I've heard him being talked about and just the general kind of myths and legends around him and the kind of yeah, just the stories that come down around Winston Churchill, right?
There was an interesting book recently about it was like 40 views of Churchill, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of went through like okay, these people thought he was great for these reasons, and these people had issues with him for these reasons, and he was human. He
Mm-hmm.
had in certain regards he could be characterized as a failure as a father. I mean, he wasn't a believer.
Mm-hmm.
He definitely had his flaws and faults, but I guess the thing that rubs me the wrong way is there's a desire there seems to be a desire in our culture to tear down anyone in history for any flaws they had. And we saw this most obviously with the uh, tearing down of statues of historical figures,
Hmm.
most in last year. And so instead of looking at, okay, what are the great things that this person did that we can build on, our there seems to be this cultural movement, not across all culture, but in certain elements of culture, to go, let's focus on what this person did poorly and forget about or erase the history, the story of what they did well, and really rewrite history.
Yeah.
And that makes me very, I'd say I'm antagonistic towards um that effort.
Okay.
So that's what I hear when I hear you going, well, how good does he represent himself as? Because when I'm reading this story, I'm going, okay, what happened here, and what can I learn from, both positive and negative? But then the question I heard was focusing on the negative as opposed to um the positive, and starting at the negative. And so I'm curious why you start there.
I don't know that you are curious, Kyle. You asked a question about 3 minutes ago, and I've tried to answer it, and you have talked over me. And I'm more than willing to let you talk. But for me, Winston Churchill started as this golden boy, and I actually didn't say anything specific critiquing him. All I said was that I want to have a nuanced view of him, right? And so of course, the story that somebody tells about themselves, especially about some huge events where there are so many points of views, of course I want to have a nuanced view. Winston Churchill did great things. I think he was a fantastic leader for the time that he was in, and I think that we can learn a lot from him. And this I think what you're seeing is me processing information at different times. Because with Winston Churchill, I haven't thought about him at all in a long time. He's just not somebody who's at the top of my list, right? I mean, not something I'm actively interested in. Whereas that stuff related to the Olympics, I had already processed a lot of that information. So you were getting something
Mm,
that was a week or two, and I had decided on what I had made up my mind. It's real something that's really interesting to me is that the way that you're expressing yourself right now is basically how my wife does when she says something that I haven't heard anything about, and I squint like Socrates, right?
uh-huh.
Like that's part of why we named the podcast what it is because at least for me, I try to without being cynical, being suspicious, like thinking about motives, asking questions.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, if that is really super bothersome to you, then we should talk about that because I really don't feel like I was saying Winston Churchill was a horrible man and we shouldn't learn anything from him. And it seems to me a little bit like you're representing my suspicion as the culture that you see maybe a flavor of in or even a tinge. When I that wasn't like that I don't know how you could have gotten that from the things that I said.
That's a helpful explanation, and I appreciate you putting in that context, because that does make a lot more sense. And you're right, I should have listened, let you say that
I mean, I
earlier.
love you, man. I really do. And, I want to keep having conversations.
Well, you keep having conversations with your wife, so I'm sure we'll keep having conversations.
Yeah, I'm not married to you. But yeah, I'm happy to continue to learn. Like if there's something else you wanted to share from Winston Churchill, but that's how I process things. And
Hmm.
that's how I process things from I mean, I don't know if you've heard I don't know if any of this is going to end up published because it's a pretty personal conversation at this point. But my buddy deconstructed his faith. And I thought what he meant was is I'm trying to go back to basics, and what he meant was he is completely deconstructing his faith and is not a Christian anymore.
Right. And that's been, I mean, you told me about that.
That was months ago. He had started a long time ago. Him and I haven't talked in probably 2 or 3 months now. Um, but I am I'm not deconstructing my faith. I think that's stupid. And that doesn't even really make sense to me because I can't deny I can't deny God. It just doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know that's a form of God's grace. Like that's God's grace that I like that's the spot I'm in. Um, I do think that we should deconstruct perhaps some of the mythology around people who were alive 100 years ago doing good or maybe not so good things and understanding that George Washington was not perfect
Mm-hmm.
and but taking the good with the bad and not just saying, "Oh, here's the bad. Now we need to completely tear them down and we can't think about who they were or what they what they did that was good because they did these evil things or had these dumb beliefs or they weren't as progressive as we would like them to be because at that point we don't have any historical figures to look to at all, right?
Right.
And so, I mean, so some of what you're saying was like it wasn't hitting the mark, but it was like it was still in the right. There was some of that that was a little true, but like taken to a much. I feel like something I said set you off, and it took it too far.
I think part of it was I've been really excited with these two books I've been reading.
Oh, and I popped your balloon or pooped on your parade.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Kyle.
Which is sort of interesting. Do you think that's part of what comes into the discussions with your wife where you come in or she comes with something that she's really excited about?
Hmm. Definitely. Yeah, I'm learning. I am learning how to communicate different things, and one thing that her and I talked about recently was impact versus intention. And there's another phrase, like another phrase that I've heard that kind of encapsulates the idea there that is a little bit more common, but it's like grace for me, mercy for others. I know what I was thinking when I was doing something. I
Mm-hmm.
know what I intended with the other people. All I see is what resulted from it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'm learning how, like, when I say something that's hurtful, um, and she expresses pain, my first reaction should not be being understood. Even though part of me thinks if she only understood, then she wouldn't be hurt. But that's very unempathetic. And instead, I should kind of meet her where she's at.
Because I think understanding where you were coming from was really helpful to me in the sense that I got to my concern was around how, like, for all of us living in this time, how what are the things that are molding us, what are the things that are informing our decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I hear what sounds like a question about should we really um
Should we be looking to Winston Churchill?
what was the what was there worth in this person and what they did.
Mm, yeah.
That's how what you were saying. I know you didn't intend it to come off that way, and I realized that. And that's how I took it. And so I'm going, okay, what is influencing Daniel, and what could what patterns of thought, or are there patterns of thought here that are going to lead him down a dangerous road,
Mm-hmm.
or a road that I'm concerned about him going down. But then when you
Yeah.
explain where you were coming from with, okay, I've processed this long, I've processed this long, and this is where I've come from with my understanding of Churchill, and or how Churchill's been held up in the past. You sounded a
Mm-hmm.
lot like you were describing the same person, and I don't want you to have you talking to me. I don't want Kyle to have a mythological view of someone who is flawed. So you were doing the same thing to me.
Yep,
Um,
probably. But yeah, um, are you afraid I'm becoming too liberal? Does that concern you?
Progressive, not liberal.
What's the difference?
Liberal is I so I'm harkening back to a book I read recently where liberal has more to do with, I guess, a desire for advancement, and this is very semantic. So I don't know how hard and fast to draw this, but liberal is more of a desire for the new to um, generate improvement, whereas progressive is adds on to that a denigration of the past.
And you would say that you're in maybe not all seriousness, but in at least a little bit, you're concerned about me being progressive and not liberal.
Yes,
Hmm. Well, as long as my liberal friends think I'm way too conservative, at least I'm balanced.
there you go. Depends on
Uh,
how
it depends on how liberal they are.
yeah, or how conservative the other friends are.
Yeah, I mean, I would say you're more centrist than a lot of my super conservative friends. I don't know how I manage. It's probably that I don't bring up way too much politics with people that are um, too far outside the standard deviation. Like, there's a group of people that I just haven't. Nah, I used to go to church with them, I guess, but I haven't seen them in like a year or more, and it's just like, and if I did, we just wouldn't talk about stuff that is really important to them, and
Uh-huh.
because I,
Fraud.
yeah, rah rah rah. You want to talk about personal development? That's as good a segue as we're gonna get.
Um, sure.
Do you feel
I
like
don't
that'd be too hard of a too hard of a switch?
know. I guess I'm not sure how much there is to discuss. Like, because it kind of comes down. It's pretty simple.
Okay, I'll lay it out for me then.
Well, I guess I was talking to someone else, and they said they don't have time to read personal development books because there are two or three good ideas and a bunch of fluff to fill the pages.
It depends on how long you spend on the personal development book, doesn't it?
And that kind of made me think, well, I mean, you can get around that by just skimming through to get the important, the two or three things, and then skipping all the fluff, which I've definitely done.
If you think that you ought to, if you're going to purchase a book, then you ought to read the thing from cover to cover. Then I would probably agree with the statement. There are a lot of personal development books that are not worth the time it takes to read them. You don't get as much value out of the two or three, things that you get out of them as it's however long it takes to read a book. Like if it's 250 pages, you could probably read it in like 3 to 6 hours, maybe depending on your reading speed and stuff. Um, if you're skimming it, you could probably do it in an hour and a half too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, depends on how hard you're skimming, right? If you're just the very top, then maybe you can do it.
Because generally you can get the first paragraph and then skip to the next chapter, maybe the last paragraph.
And it depends on how they've laid it out. Um, if they've done good things with formatting, then yeah, you could probably skim it pretty quick. But you could also just, instead of bothering with the reading of the book, you just Google whatever the name of the book is plus summary, and you can read, instead of skimming an entire book, you can get maybe 60% of the value from from an online summary of it.
Yeah, one of the actually, it's not a summary, but there's a YouTube channel called Fight Mediocrity that I really like for doing just
Hmm.
that with a
Yeah,
lot of books. It's like a 6 minute, and then he has all the like little fun graphics of stick people and that sort of thing.
sure. I yeah, I out of the like probably 60-ish productivity books that I've read, I would say 3 of them, maybe 2, hold most of the value.
Would you say that the other, in this example, 57 are mostly derivations off of the points made in those three, or did they get?
No, I think that those three books. Sorry, actually, you know what? Let me let you finish. Can you please say your whole question again? I'm sorry, Kyle.
Do the 57 books kind of combined cover the same information as the three, or do the 57 go into other helpful areas? Just there's not much, it's more sparse.
Sure. So I would say yes. In general, they're more sparse, but also those two or three books shore up my greatest weaknesses.
Oh, okay. So that is a different.
So there's two kinds of sports in general. There's a strongman sport, and then there's a weak link sport. Soccer is a really good example of a weak link sport. If you have a really if you have really bad defenders or if you have a really bad player, um, they're going to lose the ball for you every time, right? You cannot have. I mean, so if you think of some of the most famous like strikers, can you name any soccer players off the top of your head?
I mean, there's Messi and Ronaldo and Neymar, and
Okay, so Lionel Messi is probably the most famous one, at least that I know of. Um,
especially right
that's
now.
but yeah, for a couple years now actually. But
Oh, I mean, because he just left Barcelona.
well, I didn't know that. I don't pay attention to these things. But he doesn't hold the ball, isn't the one who's in control of the ball near as much as a star basketball player.
Right.
Or yeah, it's just like so the he might hold it 2% of the time. It might even be that low. I don't know. Um, whereas a star basketball player can like really dominate. They don't. And I mean, there's still. I wonder if there's a different like. Even though it's a team sport, it's still very much a strongman sport. Maybe those are the two best examples. I don't know.
Basketball is also a weak link sport in the sense that if someone is weak on offense or defense, the other team will either attack the defense or slough off the offense and focus on other players.
Okay. Well, maybe basketball is not the best. I just feel like when Michael Jordan was playing, he would routinely score more than half of the points for the whole team. Is that not true at all?
No, I mean, in a particular game, that's happened, but generally, like in LeBron's day, the average point totals in the hundreds, and he averages in the high 20s.
Well, is there another strongman sport that you can think of where one player can definitely make the difference? I've always heard that the different like and maybe even those two sports kind of compared to each other.
I mean, compared to each other, basketball is definitely more of a lean on your strongest player sport as opposed to lean on the team sport.
Mhm. I have to look this
Generally,
up.
that falls apart in the playoffs. Uh, um,
Well, can you think of another strongman sport that would be a better example than basketball?
wrestling.
But then it's just mono
Sorry.
mono a mono.
Um, I mean,
Jiu-jitsu.
every sport has its moments. I guess every team sport has its moments, right? Like baseball, if you have a really dominant starting pitcher, so there
Mhm.
with baseball and football, it kind of comes down to the position.
I
So
see.
if you have a really dominant pitcher, they can control the game. That's why starting pitching is so critical for the playoffs, because then you get into a situation where you can have your top pitcher pitch two or three, maybe even three times in a series, and make it really hard for the other team's offense. In football, generally it's the quarterback position. In
Mhm.
these days, with the way the rules are set up, if you have a fast, accurate, mobile quarterback, you can go a long ways, because you can just out offense the other team.
In any case, as far as books go, like I don't know that I would have found the books that I found if I wasn't in like if I didn't read personal development books as a rule,
Okay.
if that makes sense. So I think there's value in reading them, but I will say that for me it was a it was a long season. It was probably 3 years of reading really consistently from the library, listening to books and then reading, and then purchasing some that for different reasons. So I think, you get, if you read 10 books a year, then yeah, maybe one of them is life changing in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that, you know, I don't. Have you and I talked about Anki at all? I think we have.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I read a book, especially like, my assumption is that I can get most of the value out of a book in an hour
Mm-hmm.
ish. And then I turn the things that I learned into questions, and then I review those questions and remember them for longer periods of time so that I can use them. There's like different different quotes, different things that I think on. Like, one that I've thought of a lot of at work has been, problems don't happen, they grow.
Kind of like sin.
What's that? Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So you deal with it when it's small. It's not near as big a deal, and you can avoid most of the consequences of an action if you deal with it in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. What questions did you write out to help you remember that one?
That was a quote. That was just somebody told me that, and I knew it was valuable, and I wrote it down, and
Oh,
I've thought
okay.
about it since. There's something called a close uh, phrase. I don't know what you call it, but it's basically like a fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
Is a different type of card in Anki,
Okay.
and so I think the close card says problems don't happen, and then it's just blank, and I have to remember that they grow. So that's the card for that particular quote.
Close.
Cloze. I don't know what it means. That's just, and I talked to one of my teacher friends about it, and he was familiar with that word, but I had never heard it before. Anki.
Huh. So,
It's essentially a fill in the blank kind of test question. I think if you were to Google it, you'd come up with that kind of stuff.
oh, so it is a close.
Yeah,
I'm tracking now. You were giving an example of a close.
I was giving an example of a close.
So Mad Libs are a close.
Yeah, I guess. I think that doesn't sound right, but I don't know how you would say it instead.
Learn something new every day. Listen to the Socratic Hobbits if you want to learn something new. You've now learned what a close is.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you're not listening, you're participating. I learned about I probably learned a little bit about communication and how popping somebody's bubble makes them feel. And even if my intentions were good, it doesn't really matter.
Yes, it
Not so
does.
much. I mean, does it?
Yeah. If I give you the opportunity to explain your intentions. I'm glad though that you described what was going on going back to the close and the books.
Mm-hmm.
How you use questions to make the main points of the book memorable, because one of the things I was thinking about with regards to non self-help books, biographies and that's and books in that genre where you can look at people who have done things or activities that then or made decisions that exemplify things you learn in a self-help book. It can be more memorable to see that occur in the arc of a whole story that impacted history, as opposed to in a self-help book. A lot of times there are these little vignettes that are meant to drive the point home but are kind of, not always but often, sort of fluffy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they've like changed all the names of everybody and also taken out all of the like realistic details
Right,
of,
right.
and it's like, yeah, it's annoying is what it is.
But the way you've gotten around that is by using the questions to anchor the main points, um,
Yeah.
which also drives home the idea of skimming through to get through, or listening to it on 2 times speed or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it is much harder to use the method that I talked about, listening to stuff. Because typically, when I'm listening to something, I'm doing other things. I'm almost never listening and just sitting.
Right.
And so, taking notes or whatever.
Especially on 2 times speed, you have to dry your hands off from washing the dishes, and then it's, oh, that's next chapter. Where was I at again?
Yeah. 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 Exactly.
Are you community? to Longview these days?
Yeah, I am.
So are you getting in lots of listening on the road there, or do you mostly commute in silence and think?
Um, on the way to work, I listen to either the Bible or uh, sermons by John Piper, Tim Keller, David Platt, or worship music. I also talk on the phone with my dad most days. He's, I tell you, he got COVID.
My wife shared some of the drama from the Slack thread.
Yeah, I mean, his oxygen was at like a 90%. He had a really high fever. He talked about like making sure that he had a will. Like he got it bad.
So he was
Um,
hospitalized.
no, he pretty much refused to go to the hospital because he's a cranky old man. But I mean, he's also come out of it, so
That's good to hear.
his yeah, it's definitely a blessing. But his sister, my aunt, um, texted my sister and I a lot about it. Um, so that was I just hadn't really interacted with my aunt that way. She was very protective and wanted to make sure that everything possible was being done for my dad. So she's his oldest sister,
Okay,
and he's um,
the youngest.
the youngest by I think it's like everybody was about within 5 years, and then he was 5 years after the last one. He
Okay,
was the baby of the family. Um. Anyway, so yeah. So anyway, him and I talk in the mornings, and then on the way home, I've been listening to this. Um, yeah, it's a story. It's a long. It's this. It's an RPG podcast, which probably in somewhat sparked the interest that I had with you, which Kyle texted me today and basically said like, I don't know how this fits in with anything that you guys are doing. Or is like on the theme of, it might be fun, but it's not, it doesn't fit in the groove of what you guys are doing.
what does he think we're doing?
I don't know. I don't know that he realizes we're just having fun for the most part.
We're just
I
asking
basically
each other hard questions.
yeah, I mean, I just honestly I texted him and he didn't respond and I said something like,
Well, he's probably on a shift or something.
well, him and I had a little bit of a conversation about it, and I was like, I'm just not concerned about thematically fitting our podcast. We don't have
I
that many. I don't know.
I really want you to ask him what he thinks our theme is.
He said he already said he said little people asking big questions.
Well, that's a cop out. That's what we said it was.
Yeah. So what him and I had talked about, he was an idea that he had was I was thinking about you guys to being gnomes or dwarfs or halflings seeking a book of some kind of doing like a story, doing a little collaborative story with that kind of as the
Oh, so really trying to weave it into the theme.
well. So what that lends itself to, there's like a couple different. So obviously this is not something we would do like um this would be like a one shot is what they call it. It's like we
Maybe we should save this for episode 20.
the one shot. Yeah, probably. I mean, this might be an episode at a time. We'll see. But oh, are you saying me explaining it to you or just the one shot?
No, the one shot with Kyle,
Okay. So
with Dr. Blomgren.
with Dr. Blomgren, the what the like gnomes seeking a book lends itself really well to is a single like kind of like encounter where there's a heist and you have to do these different things in order to try to retrieve something. And so that was kind of what I was like. That's why that part of why that would work. Because we're not gonna tell like the story that I've been listening to on the way home and like on my lunch breaks. Um, they've been telling the story since 2018, and they're still. they're still telling it.
So this is like
And it's
the Game of
it
Thrones series epic level.
yeah, probably.
I mean, in
Like
length.
I mean, they record for 2 hours every single week and have been doing it since 2018. It's their full-time job. There's this cat, like, there's 5 or 6 people I like, and the others that I've listened to that are of similar length, they would record for, like, an hour a week or 2 hours a week.
So it's like a voice acting troupe.
Kind of, but
They're writing
the
their own
sto
screenplay, or not
as
screenplay,
it's like,
but
as it's happening, right? You're with other people. It's collaborative storytelling. It's where you've got, like, 5 writers in a room, and there are certain rules that everybody agrees to play by, and then you tr
isn't that called improv?
yeah, it's very improvisational, absolutely, but there's it's a little more there are rules that allow you to you don't just say you do something
Uh
most of
huh.
the time. You say you do something, and then if you're in there's different rules for combat, so if you're doing combat, then you have to abide by those rules, and there are benefits or costs if things go bad or well. So, yeah, that's kind of like the
How do you define all the rules? Because isn't it kind of like performance enhancing drugs where people are always creating new ones that cheat the system?
no, so Wizards of the Coast puts out official books
Uh huh.
once every probably once a year. Um,
And ignorance of the law is no excuse.
yeah, but like you can say, if you wanted to, you could play with just the basic rules, and you agree at a table. These are the rules we're going to play by, and then you play by those rules. And then if at a later date you find, hey, we would prefer to add this new book that includes these other things, like one of the books that they put out had specifically to do with guilds and different things, like different organizations within this world of. I'm trying to remember what the name of it's called, but I can't right now. And so then you play by these new rules, and these guilds exist in your world, and you can interact with them. You can choose to be a member of one of them or fight them in some way. I don't know, like, or oppose them. So yeah, that's kind of I don't gosh, I don't know how you would it'd be nice if there was something that I could just like, "Here, Kyle, read this one page on Wikipedia and
Uh
you'll have a pretty good idea." But like, it's improvisational with
huh.
some constraints, and in order to figure out whether you succeed or fail at doing certain things, you have dice, and it's randomized in that way. So then, just like in the real world, like, you if you fail at something, like, you have to figure out something else in order to get what you want, or change what you want, or the cost is significantly more, or it's like it's kind of whatever the game master comes up with.
What rule would prevent you from shrinking down to the quantum size so you can teleport?
um well, with different races and classes, you have different abilities, and as far as I know, there's no ability that would do that. So like, you can't just decide to do something. You'd have to figure out how you're going to do it, and maybe you say, hey, I'm going to spend, and let's just say, for example, your game master says, okay, well, you don't know how to do that actually at this point. Like, there's nothing in your, like, character sheet that says you can do that, but you know of this wizard who can teleport, and he lives 30 miles away.
Oh, so it's up to the game master to tell you this is allowed, that's not allowed. This is allowed, that's not allowed.
It's almost never like, no, you can't do that. It's like, yes, you can do that, but
Uh huh.
here's this cost. Or yes, and the cost to doing that is like the life of something that's at least as intelligent as a mouse. So every time you want to teleport and you have to learn how to do it first, you have to kill something. And it's like, well, that cost isn't worth it. That's gross.
All you have to do is kill a mouse so you can teleport.
Depends on what game you're in.
That sounds
I mean,
totally worth it.
yeah. Well, you could kill something more intelligent than a mouse too, but you don't. You only get to teleport once. I don't know, man. It's off the dome.
I am going to stand here forever.
That would be a boring game and not particularly fun. I'd probably
I'm curious
my
what the
character.
dungeon master would say.
Well, see, but you're typically playing with other people, and the like main point of RPGs is to have fun together.
Well, everyone else can stand around too, and we can chat. Then we got a podcast.
Hey guys, Daniel again. Just wanted to say thanks for listening. Also, thank you to Explore for the music. I'm not really sure if ratings on iTunes or other podcast services helps. You could try that if you enjoyed it, or sharing it with a friend, someone who you think might enjoy it as well. And if you didn't, you can go ahead and drop us a line. We've got contact info in the show notes. You can also support us like $1 a show. Thanks. We'll talk to you guys soon. September 17th, 2021. HMS Disappointment. Captain Dispatch to the Admirals. Dear Sirs, today we searched again in vain for news of the HMS Secreticabits. The world has received no updates from the vessel for a month or more. The two admirals, Daniel Franklin Hayward and Kyle Rockefeller Morris, have been rumored to be seen at events over the last few weeks, but these rumors have not been vetted. One, Pam Hunter, a reliable woman of good moral fiber, claims to have seen Kyle with his family at a church event where a large group of church-goers travel many miles up the course of a large river system and then turn inland and sojourn at a quote-unquote family camp. One reason I doubt the validity of this account is that the naming of such an event as family camp seems a little too on the nose. If this was indeed a religious gathering, as stated by the witness, I would expect them to have a more believable title for the event, perhaps the yearly pilgrimage of believers to the pines? I'm told that there are many pine trees in this land. Photos have also surfaced among the people of Facebookistan, where an individual who appears to be Admiral Kyle is standing atop a large hill, or perhaps mountain if you were in the eastern states of America, with people who resemble members of both his immediate and extended family. This photo has yet to be authenticated, and the odds of Admiral Kyle leaving his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu mats for a hike up the hill when he could be rear-naked donkey guarding someone seems unlikely. As for Admiral Daniel, little is known about his recent movements over the last few months. In the last dispatch from the HMS Secreticabits, he mentioned working with his brother-in-law on knife making. This makes me fear the worst. It is well within the realm of possibility that he had a falling out with his brother-in-law and has been slain or seriously wounded. The people of Slackland have purportedly spoken with him and say he is a leader of their Monday evening religious gathering. We will keep searching and checking with the inhabitants of YouTuberia for updates, but the outlook is not good. I fear unless we hear from them soon, we might have to declare them lost and focus on the building up of other podcast vessels, like the USS Business Wars and the HMS Field Sports Britain. The weather has cleared, and there is a favorable wind for home. The dispatch boat is anxious to be underway. I will send more word when I have news. Your servant, Captain James Tiberius Kirk Hunter. October 11th, 2021. Dispatch to the Captain of HMS Disappointment. Dear Sir, HMS Secreticabits has been afflicted with an overheating malfunction the previous 90 days. Startup was delayed. The HMS Disappointment, now dubbed HMS Appointment, was spotted briefly during this malfunction, but from afar, HMS Appointment was preoccupied. Little to no contact was made. Admiral Hayward is unfamiliar with rear or forward naked donkey guards and will not comment further, but reports were noted regarding the yearly pilgrimage of believers to the Pines. Pam Hunter's report was reliable. The grievous wound Admiral Hayward received has been repaired, though not the feelings, Tyler. Slackland's reports are less reliable. There has been a change in regime, which the Admiralty has been banned from discussing. It is advised that captains continue to work on other vessels, such as U.S. business wars. It is advised that captains continue work on U.S. business wars and other podcast vessels. Amazonia took HMS Socratic Hobbit's fuel as a processing fee. Clear skies ahead. Yours respectfully, Admiral Daniel Wooster Franklin Hayward II.